Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Influencer Academy. I'm Nikki Scholes. I'm the content manager here at Influencer, and we're really excited to bring back Influencer Academy for a summer series. I know you guys really liked it last time we brought it back when COVID hit. So today we're going to have Freelancing 101 with Amy and Jared from Gondola. Awesome people. We're really excited for this session. They have a lot of good stuff prepared for you. So Amy, if you want to go to the next slide. A little addition for you guys is some networking. So if you want to post your link to your Twitter and or your LinkedIn profiles in the chat, we'll go ahead and collect all those and then share them out to you guys after the fact so you can network with some other creatives in the industry. At the end of the session, they're going to do a Q&A. So submit your questions in the questions tab and they'll get to them at the end of their session. And without further ado, Amy, Jared, I'm going to let you guys take it away.
Sweet. We're just going to get on a little bit started since you guys already had the intro slide. Welcome to our session today. Obviously, it's with me and Jared over here. Say hi, Jared.
What up?
So a lot of you probably have seen us on Twitter before because that's probably how you heard from this event. So it's great to kind of virtually see all of you or have the vibes virtually. We think freelancing is obviously changing so much given COVID, given where the gig economy is becoming more and more prevalent. So we're excited to kind of dive into this a little bit. We're going to give intros, but here's kind of the things we wanted to talk about. Wanted to be super transparent. So stay on or ask questions during it if you have a certain thing you want to get to. But Jared's going to do the nitty gritty. It's going to be a master class. So you're going to want to see that. So I'm going to let Jared go ahead and do this intro.
No pressure. I'm Jared. That is my daughter, Ava, on the left. I am based here in Denver, Colorado. I started Gondola in 2021, I guess officially, April 2021, somewhere around there. We officially launched in February of this year. I also run Fresh Tape Media, a creative production company here in Denver. That picture of me and Buddy Heald is mainly just a flex that we were wearing the same shoes. It was a really cool moment in my professional career for like an athlete who's like wears nice shoes to be wearing the same as me because I don't have a great shoe collection like a lot of other people in the industry. Previously, I was the head of sports at Vine, and you can see that picture of my daughter. I also have a dog whose name is Manchego. He's right there. Y'all can see me in the little corner there. He's just chilling. He also goes by Manny and the Cheese Monster. That's me.
Awesome. And similar, if you guys can tell by my background, I'm in my son's room because he has the best Wi-Fi, ironically. And he's almost 4. So I'm using his iPad Wi-Fi right now to give you all this presentation. So it shows what kind of parent I am right now. So a lot of Sesame Street background. I have known Jared for a really long time. Way back in the day when he was at Vine. And it's been really cool seeing how his entrepreneurship, how he started not just one, but 2 companies, probably more that he hasn't even mentioned. He has an entrepreneurial mind, and it really helps when it talks about freelancing. So I'm excited to kind of get into that. I was at the Carolina Panthers and NFL team for the last 5 years. I need to go get my hair touched up because I have so many grays from that season of life. So if don't zoom in too much. But I really love my time there, and I was so lucky. And not everyone has an opportunity when they leave a place to have it leave on such good terms and mutual respect. And I was so lucky when I left the Panthers. It wasn't a bad breakup or anything. It was just so peaceful, and I'm just really thankful for that. And I along back in the day, I did some freelancing work with some athletes, and that's Christian Leitner and I. If you know Duke basketball, I'm aging myself, but if you remember The Shot, that is Christian Leitner there, and he's very tall and I'm very short, as you can see by that picture alone. So kind of wanted to show you a little bit of the breadth of what I've done in the past. And that's me. So I'm going to kick it to Jared, but I just wanted to set some ground rules that please, there are no ground rules, meaning that you can ask questions away in your chat. We'll be nice to each other, of course. Ask questions away in the chat. If something sparks in you, if you're like, hey, I've got to bounce, but like, can you answer this question? Like, I mean, by all means, let's do it. This is supposed to be helpful for you. So if you don't get their answers, then that's not a good takeaway for us. So feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll kind of go from there. But I'm going to toss it over to Jared.
Thanks, Sam. And you know, one of the fun things about us giving this presentation is normally when people do Freelancing 101, it comes from freelancers. It's like, here's what works for me. And the approach Amy and I have to this presentation is try to show the perspective of the people hiring freelancers. So that hopefully will give people that are getting into the freelance world a bit of context for what people are looking for on the other side of things. So just for background on what Gondola is, because it's the tool we think will probably be one of the most helpful things for you as a creative getting into the freelance world. Gondola is a analytics platform and social crediting service, essentially the first place for people to collect, organize, and track their social media posts and get credit for their work. So unlike a Behance or a personal website where you just put in the work you've done, Gondola is a place you can track the content, get analytics on it, and let other people know that you created the work you did. So we have some cool facts about how many sports teams are credited on Gondola, around 1,700, 140,000-ish posts on the platform, and over 10 billion views on the videos within the system. So it's a good time. We officially launched in February, and I'm just excited to show you sort of a little bit more about it. I think I don't, Amy, since you're changing pages, should I like pretend like I'm clicking the screen? That should work.
Yeah.
So it's, the basics around Gondola start with crediting. So when you're trying to track your work, it's as simple as pasting a link from any social platform into Gondola. And you can see it's a little bit choppy, sorry, but when you paste a link, it brings it to the post page, and from the post page, you can actually add who worked for who on every project. It's just a really unique way to not only get credit from your work, but in doing so, organize that into a profile. I should make a better sound effect. Maybe like a bleep bleep, Amy.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Also, the reason that we want people like y'all adding content into Gondola is because we have a creator search on the platform, so that once you add your content, it automatically generates data for our creator search. So let's say you are a videographer and a social media producer. You add a bunch of content into the system. You also say that you're based in Denver. And then when people go onto Gondola, they can actually search for videographers in Denver, and you'll show up in that search. So it's a great way to source leads through our platform. Bleep. I need something.
Sorry, I hit the button. There we go. Did I go too far? Nope. Perfect. There we go.
All right, so we're going to talk through, and later on we can do a demo if we have time to just actually play around in the platform and answer some questions there. But we want to get into the freelancer stuff. We want to talk through all the businessing, and we're going to probably riff more than what you'll see on the slides. So if you feel like you're not getting much text on the slides, it's very intentional. We tried to avoid it being very ready and to more have it as an open communication. So if you have questions about any of the subjects, again, type them into the chat here on the bottom right. So let's get into it. Let's talk about some basics. So first of all, decide, and also Amy and I are going to go back and forth on some of this stuff. So the first thing when it comes to freelancing basics is deciding whether to do it. It's not the easiest decision for people, especially when you have the stability of a full-time job or the prospects of that stability. I think that some of the decisions that are most, thank you, somebody just brought me Camarones Diablo. I'm very excited about that. We'll not be eating that for a little bit. One of the best things about, or most important things in making this decision, first and foremost, is not only do you believe in whether or not you can do it and it's the best use of your time, but do you feel right away that you have an army of evangelists, or at least one? And when I say that, an army would be nice. If all of us had 80 potential clients at any moment, it'd be wonderful. But has there been somebody in your life that if you ask them directly, hey, do you think you'd work with me in a freelance capacity? That could be just one person, could be the inspiration to actually make that move. I started Fresh Tape as a, solo entrepreneur because one client said, yeah, I'd work with you. So you don't need to necessarily have this massive army, although it'd be nice to build that up, but at least getting the validation from some people that they'd be willing to work with you. And while it may feel like the kind of thing that happens once you're an established brand or a big company, or once you have a huge list, this idea of client management through a CRM and managing your tasks should be something that you can probably do as early as before you've even started a company, as in listing your prospects, listing the potential partners you'd work with, using a system like Asana, using Trello. There's a bunch of other systems that aren't necessarily these massive CRM companies, but it's ways to track a combination of the tasks you do day to day, as well as clients and prospects. And what could start as a prospects list could one day be your massive list of the people you're actually working with. Yeah. Amy, do you have any thoughts on those before we keep going?
Yes. I would like to talk from his perspective. You know, while I was at the Panthers, I had a lot of people mess like, how do I get to work with the Panthers? How do I do that? And my advice was always do. So if you are an illustrator, make an illustration regarding the Panthers, if that's the team that you're trying to work for. If you're a videographer, do a sick edit, steal our clips from YouTube, steal our highlights, and make something, get our attention, and to tag us. Like, so many times, you know, we, especially if you have a good team like the Panthers had, where we were like always trying to see what people had tagged us in for some inappropriate things that we had to like hide and other things to keep notice. So we worked with so many people that weren't intended to be freelancers, but they became freelancers because they started making stuff. They weren't in their whole like head, because oftentimes people can't help you if they don't know how to help you. So if you're someone that says like, I want to be a NBA photographer, well, then you probably need to start shooting basketball games, even if it's high school basketball games, AAU basketball games, you know, with your buddies, you're shooting pickup games. Like, you got to start somewhere. And that's kind of what I always say is like, people will get noticed, but if you're not doing the things that you want to do to get noticed by, then it's really hard to get noticed. So if you're just starting, like I see there's photographers and designers in this chat, like if you want to work for big brands, then start making stuff for big brands. It may not turn into anything, but at least you're starting the action of doing them, so that when maybe you get noticed, or, you know, like for example, at the Panthers, I knew we had to have an illustration, and I was like, oh, our normal illustration people are unavailable. And I was like, oh, that one person tagged us in this. We should ask them if they're available. And they were, and they became a great freelance client that we ended up spending lots of moolah on. I don't want to give the number, but it was a lot. And they did very well for themselves. And actually now they're working for other NFL teams. So that's kind of what my take from a creative side would be, is just start. It's really scary, but once you do it, you'll feel a lot better than being all in your head of like, am I going to have clients? Am I going to pay my bills on time? Like, okay, like one thing at a time. So that's my 2 cents on that.
For sure. And the fun thing about freelancing is if you don't think of it as just like, Amy, you want to go back one more? I just want to mention one quick thing on gear. If you don't just think of it as like, I want to be a freelancer, but you think of it as I want to start a business, which really freelancing is starting a business. It is one of the lowest cost businesses to start in the world, right? Especially on the service side of things. Gear that you need is pretty limited to, you know, maybe things you already have, like a camera and a computer. But you don't need so many of the things that 99% of businesses in today's world require. You don't need a physical office space necessarily. You don't necessarily need a ton of the, you know, overhead costs that big businesses have. So as long as you make sure you are aware that the gear you own is gear that you'll be using for your work because of some legal restrictions that I'll talk about in a few minutes, then you can get started pretty darn quick. So moving on, setup. Names are a fun thing for freelancers to decide on. It may seem rather trivial, like, oh, I could name it, like I almost called Fresh Tape Media Toco Media because I was born in Toronto and lived in Colorado. I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I'm really happy I didn't. But while the company name isn't always the most important thing, the most important thing in naming a company is deciding, or naming your LLC is, do I want to be a company one day down the line, or do I always want to be individual freelancer LLC? So the decision on what your cool company name is not really as important as deciding on branding it as yourself versus some others. There's a lot of different people out there that do work as if they're a company. You know, even though it's pretty much exclusively their work, it helps with some credibility versus some people know, like, my brand is why I'm a freelancer, right? Like Jared or Amy, that is the thing that people care about most, right? So I think that it's really important to, you know, make the decision really early on. Do I want to set myself up as if I'm a company with a bigger ambition, or no matter what I do, no matter how big I grow, is my personal brand going to be the most important thing? When it comes to structure, generally starting in like with an LLC works. I think that you'd probably, once you start having employees or some other like pretty large income, you may have advantages of switching to an S corp. The good news is starting it as an LLC doesn't, and then converting to an S corp does not mean that you have to do a huge structural change to your company. It's an accounting thing. You can actually stay as an LLC that is taxed as an S corp and have the same benefits. So I would say that's the biggest thing, is just make sure when you get started, you started as an LLC. Oh, shoot, I asked the decisions about freelance for a company. I already answered that one. And then Amy, do you want to talk to anything about these things before we get into contracts and fun stuff like that?
No, I'm notoriously bad at all of those things, so I'm not going to give any insight.
Okay, fine. Wait, let's answer Ryan's question, because I feel like it's really fun to, can we do that right away?
Yeah, we have no rules here. Remember, I said no
rules.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ryan's question is, this is probably a better one for Amy. What's the biggest need in sports for freelance, remote, live video and audio professionals? Oh, I'm gonna hit start live answer. Here we go.
Oh.
Ryan asked, what's the biggest need in sports for freelance, remote, live video and audio professionals? Or who should I talk and look for folks in that space?
So Ryan, I'm gonna ask some follow-up questions. So if you tell me if this is on the head. I'm thinking when you mean by remote is not being on site and filming, etc. Like being like an editor that's remote for a project, or and not being like someone that's like the remote camera operator on an event, because I would have zero experience on that. So I'm gonna hope that that's the first is what you're talking through. So in terms of being a remote editor, or like audio, like cutting up podcasts or something, what I would say is people are looking all the time. So one, Ryan, I hope you have a Twitter, because I'm sure Jared will tell you. I would say, I don't know. My DMs are insane. Like I DM people for gigs, or, you know, especially when I was at the Panthers, Instagram too. Like I would DM people all the time being like, are you available? Are you available? Because the amount of time something would come up and people would ask me like, hey, this is crazy, but I need an editor to help me with this project. And I'm like, oh my gosh, well, I'd go to this person, and they're not available. So let's go to this person. So I shoot so many DMs off to people. So I think people just got to know what you do. The second thing, this is not a plug because I'm not a salesperson, but I love Gondola for this feature in particular, because what Jared said about the creator search, like you can showcase your work already on Gondola. So let's say someone is looking for an editor, like they can find an editor through the Gondola system and be able to message you right then and there and be like, hey, are you available for this edit? Like you have no idea who's looking at your profile sometimes. And just because you're on there, you're top of mind. So that's not my sales plug, but I do think it's a really benefit. I was talking to a few hiring managers recently in the NBA and MLB, and they're like, the talent is just hard to find talent because everyone's coming for the same people. And I was like, well, have you tried Gondola? And they're like, yes. It's so helpful. Like they're like, I'm on page 6 already, and there's so many videographers. So that's my two answers is you gotta let people get on Twitter and have on Gondola your work. I don't know if Jared, you want to hop in on any other questions on that.
Yeah, I think the other thing is some of the specific things that you can do work on, there are needs for, where you can sort of position yourself as a market expert, like a podcast editor. Like if you're the kind of person who understands the podcast world, people are really like, oh my God, because it's not like necessarily somebody would be a podcast editor entirely. But if you can position yourself to certain clients that you are an expert in that, I think it'll really help you out in terms of finding those gigs. Also, unique elements in your post-production workflow. People are looking for, somebody to help them cut a YouTube video all the time. If you have experience in After Effects, if you have experience in animation or illustration, you can sort of do some different editing tool tactics that other people don't have access to those kind of skill sets as easily. I think that'd be really beneficial.
And Ryan, I just put in the chat that there actually is with Peyton Manning's company right now, Omaha Productions. They're looking for podcast editors who are remote. So hopefully you can now get on Twitter and DM Kristen and be like, hey, I'm available. And worst can happen, she can be like, don't DM me ever again. But I highly doubt that because she encouraged that in her tweet. So that hopefully maybe that is something that would be beneficial.
Cool. Sweet. Hope that answers it. And Ryan, if you have any follow-ups on it, let us know. We can get after it. Wait, actually go back one more, Amy. I think I didn't talk about contracts yet. Oh, hooray. So contracts you need and what you don't need. Here's a fun one that people say you need, but you don't. A business plan. I think business plans are entirely overrated. I think, and when I say a business plan, I mean a formal 18-page business school business plan. Some people feel like you need that if you're going to go raise a round of funding or something like that, maybe. But if you're all getting into freelancing, it really doesn't need to be more than a couple paragraphs that you could send to somebody. I sent a bunch of paragraphs to people that was just like, hey, I'm starting this thing in 2017. And that was enough. In terms of contracts you need, though, outside of the legal structures, in terms of needing an operating agreement for your LLC and needing some baseline, the contracts with the Department of State, make sure that you get a boilerplate master services agreement and statements of work for two different things. One being, and also they'll look almost identical with a couple of words switched around. The master service agreement for your clients, and then master service agreement for subcontractors. Especially if you start growing, or if you even just need a friend to help you out with an edit, it's good to have contracts with them so that they can get paid from you. But a master service agreement and an SOW are the basics, and an NDA if you think that's valuable. Sometimes people get scared by NDAs, but it's good to have.
Yeah.
And then I think, go ahead, Amy.
No, I was just going to say, and for those who may be still new in this journey, an SOW is a statement of work, like Jared said, and an NDA, a non-disclosure, which means that you have agreement where you can't publicly talk about the work that you've been able to do.
Remember when Amy said that she wasn't the expert in this stuff?
Oh,
she lied.
Well, no,
okay, so
I only bring it up because I have been, even myself been like, when people like send over the SOW, I'm like, oh yeah, I have to Google this. What is this again? So just trying to save y'all Google.
So is not just a line in that song from Do Re Mi from Sound of Music. It's SOW. So you're not going to find much if you just Google SOW. So statement of work, Amy's point. And you can have a master services agreement with anybody without actually having a penny transferred. So let's just say you want to work with your friend Steve. He's a good editor. You can send him a master services agreement just to say at some point we'll work together, make sure our terms are good to go on that front. And then once you have a deal to work on, then those financial terms go in the statements of work. And then banks and credit cards. I've said this to people before on and off the record. Running your own company is hard. Running your own freelance business is hard. The most fun thing is the credit card points. I just think that that's like anybody who says that they enjoy like the freedom and flexibility, they're missing out on all the credit card points. That's just my take. But I think the first thing you should do is go to your bank and get a business checking account. Most banks have free business checking accounts. Some of them have fees if you have over or under a certain amount of money. But I would say go to Chase, Wells Fargo, anywhere that whoever you do your traditional banking with, and see if they have business banking accounts. I don't think that there's like a best business bank. You should go with where you're comfortable is my biggest suggestion. And then see if they have an affiliated business credit card. I think that getting a business credit card as fast as possible is important, mainly because you may have some capital purchases up front. And the best thing about spending money is when you get like some points back. Cause it's like, as long as you're intending, if you were intending to do it on a debit card, then it means that you knew you had that money in your checking account. And if you had that attitude and you're comfortable paying your credit card bills in full, the same way you would have a debit card, then I highly recommend signing up for a business credit card so you can at least, at the end of the day, accrue those points to either reinvest in your business or use for like travel and stuff. Moving on, financials. Okay, so one of the biggest mistakes I made when I started a business as a freelancer was thinking that I didn't need a system like QuickBooks or Wave or somewhere else to track my expenses. I thought, oh, if I do it all in Chase and then I put it in Zoho or one of those free apps, it'll be fine. And then I won't really need to do a balance sheet or a profit and loss stuff. I'll let my accountants deal with that one day. Biggest mistake I made. I highly recommend getting on even the lowest levels of QuickBooks or Wave or something like that as soon as possible. Once you have your business bank account set up, the automation is really great between the banks and QuickBooks, and just being able to track all of your expenses in one place is great. And also, this may sound ridiculous, but the fact that they have invoicing means you get to send an invoice to your clients right away. And there's nothing that tells higher employers about somebody's or tips off an employer to somebody's like new to the business than them either asking about what kind of invoice to send or sending some weird template from Microsoft Word that does not look really well professional. QuickBooks has that stuff like simple, and the $10 a month that it may cost for a QuickBooks account is one less Chipotle. And I don't think you should have one less Chipotle. Just earn enough to buy also your Chipotle. But I highly recommend getting set up with one of the financial institutions like QuickBooks or Wave as soon as you start your business. Once you have the bank account set up, primarily because of sending invoices. Also, play around with like so those systems automatically create profit and loss statements. That's what a P&L is. And they automatically create balance sheets. And there's all these things that like people that go to business school spend years and years trying to learn how to like fill out what goes where in a balance sheet, what goes where in a profit and loss statement. And they do it automatically for you. And it may not seem like the most important thing when you think, I'm a creative, I need to be making content. That's my highest priority. If you know your own numbers, it's just one more thing that makes you valuable in terms of like as a leader and as a business person, in addition to your creative chops. Like and as it's like when it comes to hiring people, when we know somebody also knows Excel as well as they know Photoshop, we're like, oh my God, they're so cool. Awesome. Aim, what's next?
Before we get into legal tips, let's answer the Teamworks question.
Oh yeah, good call.
So the awesome thing about Influencer and Gondola is with name, image, and likeness changing the game for college athletes and schools around the country. Content has not going to stop. And so in order to maximize those deals that are potentially coming, which are going to be huge in terms of making sure that players have ability to monetize their own personal brand, their entity, whoever their kind of their influences, that they need the quality graphics. So how many times have you seen an athlete share something that looks like someone made it that was not skilled in that? Like it's a photo that's pixelated, or like the font is like very Comic Sans, like just something that it looks not as polished as it could be. Well, what Gondola wants to do, and what we're going to be doing with Influencer, is connecting those creatives with these athletes that are looking for the type of talent that they have. So that's in videography, that's in design, Illustrator, like even when the wave of NFTs came up, how many times do you see athletes tweet like, who can design me an NFT? Who can design me an NFT? Like, we're trying to change the game and making sure that pipeline is even more accessible to athletes to have the quality of creatives. And like we said, we will have over 1,600 sports teams credited. We have the best of the best in terms of sports creatives. So it makes sense for us to partner together to give the athletes the quality as the teams that they are representing. Jared, you want to chime in on?
Just that the way it'll benefit y'all is just opportunities are going to start coming to creatives. Athletes get the benefit of finding the creatives. And then we think that especially freelancers who no longer work in the college sports space, but had historically worked for teams, these are people who are finally going to be able to help athletes with NIL deals. So we're really excited for people to, like if you think about somebody works for Clemson's video team. Once they're no longer working at Clemson's video team and they do freelance, they can start making NIL content for these athletes. And it's just a really awesome opportunity for athletes to find you and say, oh, shoot, they worked on those campaigns. They've worked on those clients. That's awesome. I want to work with them.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. So awesome. Now, legal. I'm scared. Legal. Anytime that anyone from our legal team called me, oh my gosh, like I feel like just even hearing the term lawyer, like I'm breaking out in hives. So I'm definitely muting myself because I'm not a good participant in this stuff. So go ahead, Jared.
Well, I mean, the good news is I'm not a lawyer yet, and by yet I mean I will never be a lawyer. We're all on this call about freelancing as creatives for a reason. But I think that it's really important as a freelancer to think a little bit from a place of, risk aversion in terms of, you may not have all the funds in the world to assume you could go hire a lawyer if anything awful happened, which it won't. But if it did, you just want to be ready. So I like to suggest that people operate from a slight place of conservatism when it comes to the risks they take when it comes to content creation. So you'll notice in your contracts, a lot of them will have non-competes and non-solicitations. So what those mean are if you go to work with let's say you get hired by, I saw Sydney on here, if STN Digital hires you to do a project, they may have something in their contract that says you can't solicit our people. And what that means is that Sydney, let's give an example. Let's say Amy is freelancing for STN Digital. If she signs that contract, then she can't go convince somebody that works at STN to come work with her. People want to join forces, but not have their favorite people taken from them. So you may sign that on either side of the agreement. You may be the person saying, I don't want somebody to steal my people. You may say, I don't want to steal people from my clients. And then there's going to be potentially some non-competes saying you can't work. If you're going to work with us, you can't go working with somebody else. A good example may be if you go working with Petco to make videos, they may say you can't work with competitors like PetSmart. You have to be okay with that on some level. Even if you're making something that would be so amazing for PetSmart, you have to know going into your work with Petco that you may not be able to go do it with PetSmart. More often than not, they're not going to go after you, but just work under that assumption.
Yeah. Now all I want to do is go on Petco and PetSmart's brands, their Instagram handles, and see the kind of content you make. So thank you for that. I'm going down a rabbit hole now.
And also the one way around it potentially that's not like breaking contracts is if it's different services. So if you do work for Petco as a videographer and you do graphic design for PetSmart, that could be a little safer. But trying to have exactly the same service for two competitors is a risky business. Negotiating when it comes to your contracts, it's tougher than people want it to be. In terms of like if you have if you get sent a MSA, master services agreement by a agency or by a brand, their temptation to negotiate on terms like non-solicitation, non-compete, things like that outside of the finances, there's a low appetite for negotiation, because normally the person that's giving you the contract is not the one that wrote the contract, but they filled in the budget. So for them to negotiate on the terms of, oh, you're getting paid 600 versus 400 versus 1,000 is something you should always feel like there's a little bit more flexibility there, but expecting strong negotiation on the terms around the non-compete and that kind of thing, it's a little tougher. When it comes to the risk tolerance, a lot of people will start negotiating with you and then say, this deal is next week. We're probably not going to have the contract signed. You have to make a choice. Will you do work without the contract, or will you say, I'm not going to, do an ounce of editing until I have a contract in my hands? A lawyer will tell you not to work without a contract, and a reasonable human being in this industry will probably tell you you're going to have a lot of times that you work without contracts, or you're in contract negotiations when you do your work. It depends on the kind of person you are, but in general, if you have a personal relationship with people, the lawyers will be so mad that I said this, but working on good faith is not the end of the world, and it shows people I'm committed to you regardless. As long as you know that the negotiations are not going to be about the terms of non-compete and stuff like that. It's more just on minutia around how you're getting paid. Are you getting paid on time? Stuff like that. Also, the biggest risk tolerance you need to be careful of is use of popular media. If you are doing a freelance project for the Panthers, and you want to use a Drake meme in the video, make sure and have in writing that the Panthers are okay with that. Make sure and have in writing that the Panthers are okay with you using a song that that you don't have the personal license to. And if you're going to use an Epidemic Sound or a Artlist or one of the royalty-free libraries, make sure that you understand the limitations of those libraries before you put the content in and send it to the client. A good example of that is a lot of these royalty-free music libraries say that they're free until it gets used on broadcast or something like that. So you have to make sure that if the Panthers are going to use a video you create for them using a royalty-free song, that they're not going to give it to a local TV network and get it broadcast, because then the network or Epidemic Sound or one of those may say, hey, you only had access for social. Make sure you're not using this on broadcast.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can # relate to that. So
I think that's it for fun legal tips. Content ownership is something we want to talk about. It's something to really be mindful of, because we live in a world where, yes, Gondola is telling you to make a profile full of the content you've created. One of the reasons we made it is because content ownership is a really complicated thing in the freelance space.
Mm-hmm.
More often than not, you're all signing contracts that say you're doing work for hire. Mm-hmm. You're not employees. And you don't actually own the rights to the footage that you're creating. Yeah. So if you do an edit for the NBA, that dunk of LeBron's that you put in your video may have been awesome, and the effect you put on it was sick. But if you do that without actually, and if you do that and you publish that on your personal website or on your personal Twitter account, you may be breaking your contracts. So really be very clear with your clients when you work with them, and get in writing permission to use footage, and figure out how long you have permission to use it for, or if you have to wait a certain amount of time. The last thing you want is to make enemies because somebody loved your work. And I've seen this happen where somebody makes the best piece of content. You're so grateful for it. Somebody, let's say our client was the Panthers at Fresh Tape Media, and we hired Amy to make the video. She made the coolest video ever for us, and then she went and used it without permission on her social channels. It puts such a sour taste and puts everybody in a position of risk that isn't worth it. So get in writing permission to use it. And if you get no permission to use it, you just have to be okay with that. People are not going to, it may not feel fair and may be frustrating. How can I make this video and not tell anybody about it? In the end of the day, the brands that pay you can say fully in their legal right, we paid you, you may not get permission to use this video, and you have to be okay with that. And I can tell you from a story from a friend who was like a huge Vine star, started her own agency. I asked her a question about her work and she said, oh, 50% of our work is secret. And I have to be okay with that because I'm being paid by my client and they're a big tech company that I can't tell anybody about this work. So you just have to be a little bit okay with maybe you don't own it, and that has to be okay because you got paid for it.
Yeah. Well, this is a perfect segue. Unintentional. We did not set it up like this. I promise. We are not that rehearsed. But a bonus about Gondola is everything is embedded in Gondola. You never upload anything. So you can take credit for your work and if it's like a sore subject, like Jared said, like where the brand is saying, we don't want you to post this on your social, but like you can say that you did it, like, kind of wherever the relationship kind of ended, that part, you can take credit for your work on Gondola. You can be like, okay, this, I'm not going to use the Panthers because I put them on blast too much. Let's say the Oakland A's, that's a team that I'm going to use for this example. They have this awesome illustration and you were the illustrator on it. But you guys worked it out where they don't want to be a whole hubla about you doing it. You post it on Gondola, you can be like, you were the illustrator. So if anyone were to ever look up that link, put it in Gondola, they could see you were the illustrator for it. And you, for those of you who are new to Gondola, those stats from the Oakland A's would show up on your profile. So you're getting the public metrics behind that post. Sorry, I have the hiccups in the middle of this. This is how awkward. The other thing of Jared had mentioned, like NDAs, the non-disclosure agreements. If you're working, like, let's say you're that Vine star and you want to have a portfolio of your work, though, we have something where you could have everything private, where you can upload. I said upload and I just said no. You can put the links of the content that you have made, and you can make it private where no one could see the credit. So there's also ways that we're trying to work around systems of the freelance world, which is taking embed, so you're never upload anything. So it's like if you post something from the Oakland A's, it's not something you're posting somewhere else. It's something that the account gets the analytics from, and that if there's a way to privatize it. So if someone doesn't want you have an NDA, they don't want you to know that you did work for Shakira because she's on a new NBC show I just saw a promo on. They don't want to let you know you did work with Shakira, then you can just private. You can make it private and no one can see it but you. So we're trying to work around that system. And this is a tight group that we have right here in this session today. So if you have more ideas of how to make Gondola better for the freelancer world, please let us know. So I just wanted to kind of chime that in a little bit.
Thanks, Aim.
We're at 15 minutes here. Do you want us to speed through, get to some questions?
Yeah, we'll be fast.
Okay.
We'll be fast, really quick. Next one. I think the long ones we've already gone through. Oh, tell the world. People, I think that some of the best examples, there's so many different ways to communicate this. And Amy, I think you can probably talk a little bit better than I can, but like sending emails that feel custom. So you can do like a custom template, if that makes any sense. And what that means is that when you're explaining that you started a freelance project, that you started your freelance business, and you reach out to people you've worked with in the past, you can have a template that says the same, thing. Hey, Amy, it's so great to hear. It was so great to hear from you blank time period ago that you spoke to X person. Loved working on X project together. And then you can go into your template so that when you are telling the world, it doesn't feel like you're on blast. And it feels more like custom bespoke emails. I love that. Also, like texting somebody and just saying, if you have somebody's cell phone number, and say, hey, I'm working on something, I love your take on it. And tell them almost like they're an advisor to you as a freelancer, not just a potential employer, is a great way to get in. So if you say to somebody, hey, I'm starting out this freelance business, I want your take on something, rather than, hey, do you have any opportunities for me? They will be like, ooh, he wants my take. Maybe he wants to know what kind of stuff I think is the best for freelancers right now. Maybe he wants to know what I think about gear. And then all of a sudden you're having a conversation that can lead to business. So that's my first take. Amy, what are your thoughts on it?
It's so funny. It reminds me of one of the first times Jared and I got to team up on something was he had just started Fresh Tape, and he had called me, and he's like, hey, I have an idea for this new initiative that the NFL was launching called My Cause My Cleats. He's like, I have this idea. And he's like, I just want to pitch, get your thoughts. I think that's exactly what he said. And he showed me a little slideshow similar to this. And he's like, hey, this is kind of my vision for this. And I was like, oh, I was just starting out at the Panthers. I was like scared to ask the Panthers for like freelance money. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this, Jared. It's such a cool idea, but like, I don't think I have the budget. And he's like, okay, let me find a way. So he reached out to the NFL, and he was like, the NFL approved that we can do this. I'm flying out. And he in 2 days flew out, filmed these amazing videos, cut 17 videos of these My Cause My Cleats, turned them around, and they still today are like one of my favorite things that I did at the Panthers. Well, I didn't really do that, but like that we did during the time at the Panthers, because it was just so fun. That gives a lot of credit to Jared and Max Huggins at the time, because they just honestly, they also needed, it was a mutual thing. We needed content. They needed content to market their business. And it kind of worked out. It was the craziest 2 days ever. So that just kind of goes to show you that I don't like to speak in cliches, but I am a cliche sometimes, that sometimes you gotta spend money to make money, and doesn't always have to be thousands of dollars. But sometimes it could be where it could be your time, meaning spending time on something to get people's attention on. But I always go back, if you need free advice, I'm always someone that people can't help you unless they know how to help you. So if you want to, let's say you're Ryan and you're like, I want to do more podcast audio remote. If you're so brave, putting it on your LinkedIn, putting it on your Twitter, reaching out to someone that you know in the business, being like, hey, I'm available for work. I really want to get more into the podcast scene. People there can easily know then how to help you. Rather than when people tell me, I want to work in sports. It's like, well, what does that mean? Do you want to be in operations? Do you want to be in PR? Do you want to be in tech? Do you want to be in scouting? Do you want to be a TV host? But when people tell me I want to be photograph WNBA games, I'm like, oh, okay, great. Here are all the people I know. Let me connect you. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, 2 cents. One thing on that I think is a hot subject is doing free work early on. I don't actually think people should try to pitch themselves to do things for free early on. I think ideas can be free. I think you don't have to charge people for your concepts right away, as long as you think you can get them. You are insinuating that you want to be the ones to produce them. But hey, I'll do this edit for free almost is discounting yourself before you get a chance to go charge. So maybe the difference is between what Amy's idea was before about going and shooting basketball is not that you're going to shoot basketball and you're convincing them that you'll do it for free to them. It's like saying, I want to test out some of these things and it's going to be added to my reel, but you're not going to a big brand and saying, I'll do this for free for you. I think that discounting early on is, it almost makes people think you're a little bit more desperate than you are when you need to show strength.
Yeah. Don't do work for free is what I say as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Jared.
Amy, talk about this.
Well, I put my shades on for this one because this is a serious talk. I think for when you do become, let's say, a part-time freelancer, or even you have a job and you're doing something you're moonlighting as a freelancer on the side on weekends, no matter what, especially during this time in life, your time is also your money, so you don't want to discount not having time for yourself. So that's kind of a big thing I like to harp on with a lot of the freelancers I know, is when I reach out to someone being like, hey, do you think you could work on this project for me? I also, and I always tell them, this is just who I am, and I'm an empath if you haven't been able to notice. I ask them, but just want you to know, it's okay to say no. Don't take this on if you can't take this on. It doesn't bother me, just wanting to reach out to you first. And oftentimes it just kind of sets a relief to people that it's people don't want to turn down business. People like making money and they want to pay their bills, etc. So I like to tell people that up front, so that if they feel like they can't do it, it's okay. And that doesn't mean that work will stop. It just means that this isn't the right project for them right now. So I think what a lot of people who are freelancing, especially full time, they know the power of no, which I am not good at, but I am working on myself. So I think that's kind of just a nugget I'd like to drop. And Jared, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that
Yeah,
one.
I mean, I have a serious like life regret from when I started freelancing that I want to make sure that people in our industry don't fall into a trap. Taking on projects is one thing in terms of like we all run into the say no boundary. I'm a say yes to everything person, and I actually don't think it's always bad. I think there's a lot of people that are there's like a huge set boundaries, say no culture that I'm not 100% on board with, because I like to think that if you can't take something on and you learn how to collaborate with people early on in your freelance days, then you'll actually be able to scale your business faster. When I think about self-care and maintenance, it's also about making sure that certain things are done for yourself time-wise in the day that you really couldn't do if you weren't a freelancer. And I messed up. When I started Fresh Tape, I was living in the mountains in Colorado. And the best time to ski every day is 8:30 to 10. That's when the best snow is. And I was so in my head that those are prime New York working hours. I was going to miss some email. I was going to miss a call. I was going to be slow. I couldn't do those things, that I never skied in a place that was the best skiing in the world. And I justified it to myself that I needed to be on during those hours. And I never took care of myself. And an hour and a half a day of doing something you love will make you feel so energized to work every other hour. And I'm not saying you have to work 22 hours in addition to the 2 that you go have fun. But really, I can't stress enough that like all of us that have done freelance have run into the problem at some point in their life where they said, if I'm not working, I'm losing money because I could be making money in those hours. And if you're not taking care of yourself for fun and like for your personal health and joy in some of those hours, then you're also not like investing in yourself. So that is the biggest thing, is not necessarily go say no to projects, but make sure that over the course of the day, you go do something for you. Because when you work at a big company or you run your own company, it gets harder and harder the more people you work with to take from 9 o'clock to 10 and go to the gym and be good to yourself. So that's my biggest suggestion. I think that's pretty much the last slide, right? Is there another one? I thought there was one more. You're muted, Aim. Oh, question.
We got about 8 minutes, and I was sorry, I got distracted trying to do a cool emoji that I just forgot that I was like, we should be using these cool things. So questions. I'd love for anyone, if they had questions, to drop them in the chat. Like, already we've had a few, or you can have Jared and I wing it, which is also fine. So got some.
No, thank you, Ryan.
Oh, I love when it says typing. It's like, love.
Kind of wakes me up. Like, what if Sydney was typing and she's like, no, I didn't mean to. I shouldn't have.
Oh, someone's coming on screen. Is it Nikki? Oh, it's Teamworks.
Oh, okay. Sydney, how important is a deck when presenting to a new client? That's a good question. It actually kind of depends.
Thoughts on this? I like this.
Oh, yeah. Or we don't. I don't know. We'll find out. Ready, Amy? You want to say it at the same time?
No, you go first.
I think that presenting to it really depends on the relationship, because on some level, one of my favorite things to do is present without a deck to get emotional feelers for something. The last thing you want to do is spend 12 hours on something that nobody cares about. Yeah. Right. But when you talk to a new client, you say, hey, I'm Jared. I want to talk to you about this idea. The idea is it's globes with cameras in them, and you spin them. And when you point to a country, it like triggers a GoPro being recorded in that country. This is a bad idea. But for me to build a deck around that concept versus like say, Amy, I have this crazy idea. Mm-hmm. Hear me out. What do you think? I think that that's probably a more important thing. The deck is good for presenting capabilities in general, But I think that having just general like fun conversations and also being hyper aware that there's no such thing as stupid ideas. Actually, the best ideas are stupid ideas. Ask Amy about the time that I called her and said, "Hey,
Yes.
what if we get James Taylor to announce the Panthers' first round pick?" And it was just like, this is a crazy, stupid idea, and it actually happened. And James Taylor announced the pick.
Yeah. It was crazy. And the reason was because he sings a song about Caroline on his mind. So that was the tie-in. But we actually are on the same page with this. Dex is always a hard word to say. I hate Dex. And I don't like them. The times and hours I've spent on Dex, this is just bad. Just don't use them is what I can't even say that anymore. I'm going to start laughing. Nikki, you're on, please.
Yeah, I know Amy feels that way because she is like, can we just make a deck that just has like 1 or 2 words per slide? And I was like, yeah, that's ideal for everyone.
Well, I like using them, but when I've spent my time so many times on PowerPoints before, and I'm gonna use that word instead. No one's seen them, no one cared. Like, how many times for a team president I've done a huge PowerPoint, spend weeks and hours on it, slaved away, and no one even opened it. So I don't like. I don't even. Also, I'm with Jared. Just call someone. So. Nikki,
also, hot take, Sydney, on that. I think budgets are more important than decks. So, like, if you come to somebody, let's just say you had an idea for a video, a documentary short you want to film for the Panthers. That's like what you want to be presenting to them. If you come with a huge deck and then you sell it to them and they're like, "This is amazing. What's it going to cost?" And you say $600,000, and they're like, "Yeah, no." Then you wasted all the time on the deck. When creating like a budget in Excel or Google Sheets that helps you understand your costs and like what it's going to cost the client, way more valuable, at least for getting them set up right off the bat for like yeses and nos. What's up, Nikki?
Hey guys.
Hey. I think that was all the questions we had.
Yeah, so if you didn't know Amy and Jared before, you can see why we love them so much. I hope you got a lot out of this session, and you go get on Gondola if you're not on there already, because it's going to be beneficial for you for sure. Amy, you can go to that next slide. They didn't know it, but they teed up our next session pretty well. Oops, I have the wrong slide in there, but that's okay. So our next session is actually going to be with Emery. He is from Harvard Athletics, and he's going to be talking about level setting expectations as a creative. And that's going to be next Wednesday. So if you're somebody that is feeling burnt out, you need to say no more often, like Amy said, or you're trying to build a strong creative team, especially in the collegiate space, this session is for you. He's going to talk all about it. He has some problems and solutions that he's going to talk through. So I'm going to share that link in the chat if you want to register for that session next week. And again, if you want to post your Twitter and LinkedIn in the chat, we'll get a networking sheet out to you guys later on. But thank you all for joining, and we hope to see you in the future.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us. Y'all are cool.
Emojis.
Yeah. Follow for follow. Anybody who pastes their Twitter account in here will be followed, and we can go,
Wow. Throwing it back.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
I can mimic this little thing behind me. Bye-bye.